How's everyone doing today? It's your boy JG Domination, and today we're here with a 2020 NFL free agency trades that went down basically within the last 48 hours. So Sunday, March 15th and Monday, March 16th, we're going to be talking about the 4 trades that went down within that time period. 4 pretty impactful trades, 3 that are going to have pretty big impacts. The other I think it's a nice little trade, but that we will talk about. So we're going to start in chronological order based on how these things happened. So we're going to be starting off, of course, with the Jacksonville Jaguars sending Pro Bowler, All-Pro Walter Payton, Man of the Year, Calais Campbell to the Baltimore Ravens for a 2020 5th-round pick. I'll be talking about both sides of the trade. Of course, for Baltimore, you're adding a great player and Calais Campbell. He's up there in years, but he's still playing at a high level. He was just a Pro Bowler this past season, and one of those guys that earned the right to be a Pro Bowler instead of some guy filling in for someone. So Calais Campbell's still a great player. Along with that trade happening, Calais Campbell gets a 2-year, $27 million deal. $20 million of that will be guaranteed. So Baltimore keeping a great player on their team for at least 3 years. I imagine he retires a Baltimore Raven, and by the time those 3 years are up, Lamar Jackson's contract will be up as well. Sorry if I'm talking a little weird. I have this cut on my tongue and it's annoying. For Jacksonville, it just shows clear desperation of them trying to get off of any contract they can that's holding them back in terms of having cap flexibility and rebuilding for the future. My issue is the Jacksonville Jaguars have been rebuilding for 20 years, so I don't get why they're so urgent to do it now. They've been terrible basically for at least 17 of the past 20 seasons, so I don't really understand why they have this sense of urgency to rebuild again. And they could have gotten a lot more. They could have gotten at least a 2nd-round pick. If the goal was to offload Calais Campbell to a contending team, why didn't they hit up other teams that have more cap space that probably could have given them more? Like the Seattle Seahawks, the Buffalo Bills, not the Tennessee Titans. Who am I trying to think of? The Philadelphia Eagles, or I don't know. Those are really the best examples, honestly. Those are teams that probably could have gave you a late 2nd-round pick, or maybe a 3rd-round pick and a 5th-round pick. I just feel like you could have gotten a lot more for Calais Campbell. To me, this is a desperation move to get his contract off the books. And, good for them, I guess, but they definitely undersold how much more they could have gotten for a player of Calais Campbell's stature. So definitely Baltimore wins this trade. Jacksonville, they get off the contract, but they really didn't get the value for a player of his, ability. Next up, probably the worst trade I've ever seen. The Arizona Cardinals will be receiving DeAndre Hopkins and a 4th-round pick in 2020. What did the Arizona Cardinals have to give up? You're probably thinking, okay, they had to give up a 1st-round pick, a 2nd-round pick, and a player to get somebody of DeAndre Hopkins' ability, a top 3 wide receiver in football. Nope. The Arizona Cardinals received wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins and a 2020 4th-round pick in exchange for a 2020 2nd-round pick, running back David Johnson, and a 2021 4th-round pick. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. This has to be the worst trade I've ever seen for a star player. At least for the Odell Beckham trade, the Giants got a 1st-round pick and a starting offensive lineman. Who's to say David Johnson is even the true starting running back on this team? You have Duke Johnson, who towards the end of the year started to play better once he got more involved in the offense. And that 2nd-round pick, cool. You got a 2nd-round pick that'll be pretty early. What are the chances you're drafting the next DeAndre Hopkins at that pick? And, David Johnson's an older running back. He's 28 years old. He isn't necessarily on the up and coming. He's kind of been declining the last couple of years. And the thing is, you traded a top 5 wide receiver in football, and You had to give them a 4th round pick. You had to give them a 4th round pick. That's ridiculous. This is probably the worst trade I've ever seen. And I get it, you know, Hopkins is a wide receiver. This wide receiver class is stacked, blah, blah, blah. What are the chances at pick 40 or pick 41, whenever this 2nd round pick is? What value is the pick? Let's see. What value is it? It doesn't say, but it's probably like pick 41. Yeah, what are the chances at pick 41 you're taking DeAndre Hopkins or a player on that level at wide receiver like DeAndre Hopkins? You know, like, the chances aren't very good, buddy. I'll tell you that right now. For the Cardinals, you know, they're an offense that runs a lot of 4 wide receiver sets. Getting DeAndre Hopkins means you're getting your number 1 receiver, arguably one of the best receivers in football. Kyler Murray got to be smiling somewhere entering his sophomore season. We've seen the jumps that Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson have taken in their sophomore year. You got to wonder if Kyler Murray takes the same jump. Fun fact, I have a Kyler Murray rookie card that is worth a lot of money. And let's just say the value is going to go up a lot this year because, yeah, getting DeAndre Hopkins, the new CBA making it 7 teams in the playoffs. Who knows? Maybe the Cardinals mess around and get the 7th seed. You know, I'm not saying they will, but they probably could. Getting DeAndre Hopkins, that's huge. And they still have the number 8 overall pick in the draft. Who's to say they don't go after CeeDee Lamb at wide receiver out of Oklahoma, former teammate of Kyler? Or maybe they just go with the best offensive tackle available. Like, there's a lot of options. There was already a lot of options before for Arizona. Now getting DeAndre Hopkins, it feels like at number 8 overall, you have a luxury pick that can be made. Or maybe the Cardinals trade down and try to get a 2nd round pick. But either way, man, hell of a trade from the Cardinals. That was a straight up heist. The Texans, that's what happens when you don't hire a general manager and you have your coach make all of your decisions. There's a reason he's a head coach and not a GM, because he cannot handle the GM duties. And it shows. I mean, they traded 2 first-round picks and a 2nd to get Laramie Tunsil, which, you know, I get because he's a really good left tackle, and Kenny Stills. You know, like, what the hell are you doing? And they traded to get Carlos Hyde. They traded like a 3rd round pick to get Duke Johnson, which was weird. This front office is just very confusing. The front office is ran by Bill O'Brien, the head coach, who doesn't really seem to know what he's doing. I don't get it, man. I don't get it for the Texans. Like, yeah, Deshaun Watson's going to be fine. You know, he's a really good quarterback. He still has Will Fuller, but the problem is he's never healthy, but really good when he is. And Kenny Stills is a fine receiver. Kiki QT is a fine receiver. Like, he'll be fine, but damn, losing a top 3 receiver and not getting much in return for him, I mean, wow. And keep in mind, Bill O'Brien didn't want to pay Jadeveon Clowney. You know, he traded him for a 3rd round pick and like 2 players who play on special teams. So I just want you to keep that in mind, that this is the same guy who traded a stud defensive end. Yeah, he doesn't get the sack production, Jadeveon Clowney that being, but he gets a lot of pressures. The team and the defensive line around him plays better when he's on the field, and he's a disruptor. You traded that guy for a 3rd round pick and 2 guys who play special teams. I want you to keep that in mind. This is the same coach that made that trade. Okay? So we shouldn't even be shocked that DeAndre Hopkins went for nothing. Okay? He went for nothing. Now we move on to the next trade. The Atlanta Falcons are going to be acquiring Hayden Hurst and a 2020 4th round pick from the Baltimore Ravens in exchange for a 2020 2nd round pick via the New England Patriots and a 2020 5th round pick. I believe that was the 5th round pick that they got in some trade or something with Marcus Peters. I can't remember. But anyway, I like this trade for the Falcons. You know, you can argue they probably gave up a little too much. Maybe a 3rd and a 5th round pick you feel more comfortable with. But, you're really nitpicking at that point. This is a team in the Atlanta Falcons who had to sacrifice letting Austin Hooper go, and I think them getting Hayden Hurst is actually pretty good. I know some Falcons fans are pretty divided on them getting Hayden Hurst, but I like it, you know? Like, I know people are going to say, well, he was drafted in the first round. Mark Andrews was drafted in the third round, and Mark Andrews has outplayed Hayden Hurst up to this point. Yeah, I know that. Also, a lot of people at that time had Mark Andrews over Hayden Hurst on draft boards. So yeah, that's not really a surprise to a lot of people. That's just the Ravens like making a bad move, which they haven't really done that much other than extending Joe Flacco. Like, they haven't really made a ton of bad moves, you know, and they stick out because they're a franchise that has a good track record. Like when they drafted Brashad Perryman, paying Joe Flacco, and then, you know, Hayden Hurst over Mark Andrews, Calvin Ridley, and a few other like good players that went down there at the end. But I like this trade for the Falcons. It wouldn't surprise me if he's like a top 12 tight end next year in terms of production. Maybe not actually a top 12 tight end, but he's one of those guys who he's up there in terms of like catches and yards. Like he could be. It wouldn't surprise me. You know, like he could easily just be a plug and play guy who's coming in to fill in for Austin Hooper, which he's a pretty good blocker. He has the baseball background. A good receiver as well. Maybe not the greatest route runner. Like he's not going to be the complete receiving package that Austin Hooper was, but he's a better blocker, and I think can be just as productive with this dirt cutter offense with Matt Ryan at quarterback. And for Baltimore, they now have 2 second-round picks, 3 picks in the top 60. I do expect Baltimore to have another killer draft to go along with everything they've been doing in free agency. Like getting Calais Campbell, tagging Matthew Judon, getting Michael Brockers. Like, they've been pretty active. They're going to go all in with Lamar while he's on a rookie contract, and I expect them to have a killer draft, and them getting another pick doesn't surprise me. Another couple of picks, actually. But again, for the Falcons, I like the trade. Again, you could argue you gave up too much for a guy who doesn't really have the production, you know, was like the third tight end on the Ravens. But you got to think the Ravens use 2 and 3 tight end sets all the time, and he was more of a blocker and a decoy down the field. Now he's going to be a guy who can get his own. He can get production with the Atlanta Falcons. And Baltimore, that pretty much tells me they're going to draft another tight end. Maybe they go for another receiving tight end or more of an H-back or fullback type of guy. Who knows? But good trade all around, in my opinion. And then finally, the Indianapolis Colts are trading the 13th overall pick in the 2020 NFL Draft for stud defensive tackle DeForest Buckner. I really like this trade for both sides. For the 49ers, you know, a lot of tough decisions have to be made with this team. They re-signed Arik Armstead. I'm not really the biggest fan of his. You know, like, he really didn't do shit, you know, until Buckner started breaking out, and then he started feeding off of him. You know what I'm saying? Like, Buckner is probably the second best defensive lineman they have outside of, you know, maybe Nick Bosa, I guess you could say, who obviously had that crazy year last year. But to me, DeForest Buckner is probably the best or second best on that team, on that defensive line, that stud defensive line with a bunch of different playmakers. And he's going to the Colts, and the Colts are probably going to give him like $21 million a year, I think I read somewhere. So he's going to cash in big time, and the Colts traded the 13th overall pick. And I know in a lot of mock drafts, including with me on this channel, like, a lot of people have the Colts taking a quarterback. Well, now you can't mock them a quarterback in the first round, and I'm pretty sure Colts fans are relieved. Like, man, we don't have to hear our names anymore in mock drafts about, oh, we're getting Herbert, or we're getting Love, or we're going to trade up for Tua or something. Like, I'm pretty sure they're relieved about that. They're getting DeForest Buckner, who is just an absolute stud. From the 49ers' point of view, they get a draft pick, you know, a mid-first-round pick, early mid-first-round pick, I guess you could say, and they're probably going to trade down. I don't actually expect them to make a selection at 13. I think it would be cool if they did, because it's a pretty deep draft. They could go with the best wide receiver available. They could go with the best defensive player available. But in my opinion, I think they should trade down. I think trading down wouldn't be a bad idea if I'm San Francisco, because they don't have a second round pick, a third round pick, or a fourth round pick. So if they can trade down from 13 like a couple of times, if they can trade down a couple of times on night one, I think that'll be very beneficial. But the thing about projecting trade downs is it has to make sense for the other team as well. And if it doesn't make sense for the other team, then there's no reason to mock it. And speaking of mock drafts, next Monday, I'm going to come out with a mock draft. And you know what? I did say that I was only going to do one mock draft with trades. Screw that. We're here to have fun. I'm not going to let some virus stop me from having fun. We're going to be doing a mock draft with trades post first wave of free agency. That's right. So, boom. Making a big announcement here on the channel. But let me know how you guys feel about all these trades down below in the comment section. And don't worry, we will be covering other, the stuff that happened in free agency, big signings in the AFC, the NFC. We'll be talking about all that stuff, so don't you worry. We'll see you around next time for that video. But hopefully you guys enjoy. Again, let me know down in the comment section how you feel about the trades that transpired within the last 48 hours. And peace out.